Good morning and welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Thursday, the 23rd day of Adar. Let's begin with tzedakah. Gedei tzedakah shemekareves es hageula. Tzedakah will bring Moshiach, which is the topic of today's Tanya. Today we're starting chapter 37. And we know that one mitzvah can tip the scale and bring Moshiach. We mentioned this many times. What the Rebbe says, the Rebbe quotes what the Maimonides says, that the way we're supposed to view the world is that like it's the world is like on a balanced scale, half good and half bad. And if you do one mitzvah, it can tip the scale and Mashiach will come. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe tells us exactly how this works. In other words, the coming of Mashiach, of course, is a beautiful thing, a good thing. But the Rebbe explains it's not just like it's a reward for something good that you do. And if you have a majority of good deeds, you get the reward for all the work that you do. It is more than that. The Rebbe explains the idea, which means what it says that schar mitzvah mitzvah. The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. It's not like when you go to work, when you have a job, the work that you do and the reward, the salary that you get, are not directly related. Yes, you work and you get money, but you don't create the money. It's not that you create the reward. But when we're talking about the mitzvahs that we do throughout this time before Mashiach, every mitzvah that we do creates the redemption. How so? So this is based on what we explained in the last few chapters. That Hashem, God's purpose of creation of this world is that he should have a home where he can be revealed in a revealed manner in this world. And that means that in this world, when we have a world of darkness, where God is concealed, we don't see godliness. And yet we use the world and the energy of the world, and we fulfill God's will. Every time we do that, we transform the items, the objects that you do, that you come across with, that you use to fulfill God's will. You transform them from being in the domain of the klipa, the shells, the impure places, and you elevate it and unite it with God's, the domain of kedusha, the domain of godliness. And to understand what the chapter we're going to learn now, just a little introduction, what we said before, that in this world we have the domain of holiness, godliness, and we have the domain of klipa, the shell that conceals godliness. And in the klipa itself, you have two types of klipa. You have the shell, the domain of ultimate impurity. It's called the sholish klipis atmeyas, the three ultimate impure klipa. And that is something which cannot be elevated. Our job is to completely break them. These are things that are completely not pure, that cannot, not like non-kosher food, for example. We cannot elevate them. Anything which is completely impure, not pure, cannot be elevated. And then you have the klipa, the neutral klipa, that has a potential to be elevated, and that is everything else, the majority of things in this world. Food, items, things that grow, animals, most of the things that are kosher animals, that can be eaten, that can be used in a proper way, in a holy way, can be elevated. And this is what we do with the mitzvahs. We elevate the world. And that is a cumulative process that we did for thousands of years. that we constantly work to elevate one part and another part, and although we don't feel it right now, but the job is done, is being done. Every time you do a mitzvah, you elevated a certain part of the world, and once you elevate, it cannot go back. It becomes pure, becomes holy. So that's inside chapter 37, what the Alter Rebbe says. זה דאלת רבי, והנה תכליס השלימוס הזה של ימויס המשיח וסחייס המסים, שהוא גילוי אויר אין סוף ברוך הוא בעולם הזה הגשמי. Now this ultimate perfection of the Messianic era and the time of the resurrection of the dead, meaning the revelation of the Ein Sof light in this physical world, tolui b'maaseinu v'avideseinu kol zman meshech hagalus. This is dependent on our actions and divine service throughout the period of exile. It is what we do in the time of exile, in the time of darkness, when things are difficult, when you don't see godliness. This is when it really counts. For it is the mitzvah itself that causes, meaning that creates its reward. Like unlike when you work and you get a salary. Here the mitzvah itself creates the reward. Why? Because by performing the mitzvah, man draws the revelation of the blessed Ein Sof light from above downwards. This is to be clothed in the physicality of this world, meaning in an object which has before been under the dominion of the klipas noiga, the neutral klipa, and it received its vitality from this klipa. And what are those things? Anything which is kosher. Shem kol dvarim atahirim umatorim shenases be'ema mitzvah maisis. Namely, all the pure, permissible objects with which an act of a mitzvah is performed. So a permissible object, until you do the mitzvah, like for example, a branch of a palm tree, does not have holiness to it. So it belongs to the area, to the domain of the klipa, of the impure things. It's not godly. But when you take that branch and you take it off the tree and you make a bracha and you use it as a lulav in the holiday of Sukkot, you just elevated and you reunited the power, the energy that is in the branch into holiness. And Alter Rebbe is going to bring examples of 3 types of mitzvahs, which include examples of the living animals, an example of the vegetations, an example of the inanimate objects. So it says, Kegoin, klafat tefillin mezuzah v'sefer Torah, for example, the parchment of tefillin, mezuzah, and sefer Torah, which must be made of the skins of permissible kosher animals. As our sages say, for the work of heaven, meaning a mitzvah object, only that which is pure and permissible to eat may be used. So you can make tefillin only from such animals that is allowed to eat. You cannot make it from non-kosher animals. And another example is from the vegetation world. Similarly, an esrog which is not orla. An esrog is the citrus fruit that we use for the 4 species and sukkos. And you cannot use just any esrog if it has to be a kosher esrog, which means something that is not orla. Orla is a tree, a new tree. The first 3 years is considered orla. You're not allowed to use them. And the same thing is also mois at tzedakah she'einen gezel v'kayetze b'hem, our money given to charity that has not been acquired through theft and the like. So you have that money, this is an inanimate object. The money becomes, you elevate the money. but has to be kosher money. It cannot be money that is earned through theft. There was once someone had his tefillin stolen, and he wrote to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe told him that he should make sure to completely have in mind to forgive the thief. I said, why? In case the thief decides to use the tefillin to put it on, if he didn't forgive it, then it's stolen tefillin. But if he forgave him, then it's going to be considered the kosher tefillin. So anything what you do has to be for pure. And here in the footnote, the Alter Rebbe explains why the arla cannot be used for the esrog. He says because the arla belongs, the fruit from the first 3 years of the tree, it belongs to the impure, total impure klipas, cannot be elevated. That's what Alter Rebbe says. Sha'olei imisholosh klipas atmeis legamre, she'ein lem aliyah le'olam, k'meshe kosu ve'etz chai. For arla is of the 3 complete unclean klipas that can never ascend into holiness, as it is written in Eitz Chaim. Thus, fruit, which is arla, deriving its vitality from these klipas, cannot be elevated by having a mitzvah performed with it. So, because it's tied to the impure, so it cannot be elevated. And the same thing is every mitzvah that comes through a sin. Similarly, any mitzvahs whose performance involved a transgression, God forbid, since the sinful act receive its vitality from the 3 completely unclean klipas, the resulting mitzvah cannot elevate it. So, going back to what we're talking about, when we take an object which belongs to the domain of klipas noiga, the neutral klipa, and now you fulfill God's will with it, then you elevate the energy in that object. Now that one fulfills God's commandment and will with these objects, the vitality within them ascends and is dissolved and absorbed into the blessed Ein Sof light, which is His will that is clothed in the mitzvah, the divine will that each mitzvah represents. And why is that? For in a mitzvah, there is no concealment of the countenance whatsoever to hide His light. The mitzvah is the will of Hashem, the ultimate, the inner will of Hashem. That is why the world was created. The world was created so that the Jew fulfills God's mitzvahs. In addition to that, now the Alter Rebbe goes to say, not only the objects that you do the mitzvah with is elevated, but also your energy, the energy of your vitalizing soul that is used in doing the mitzvah is also elevated, because the godly soul cannot work and do the physical actual mitzvahs without involving the vitalizing soul, the soul that makes you work. Godly soul is more spiritual. The soul that makes you actually work is also belongs to the klipas noiga, the shell that is neutral. When you use that energy to do God's will, it is elevated and it becomes united with Hashem Himself. That's what Alter Rebbe says. V'chein koyach nefesh hachiyunis habahamish shebe'evri haguf ha'odam hamekayim hamitzvah shebe'evri guf ha'odam hamekayim hamitzvah u'mislabesh gam ken b'asiyah. Similarly, the power of the vitalizing animal soul clothed in the bodily limbs of a person who performs a mitzvah, likewise clothes itself in the deed of the mitzvah. And therefore, thereby it ascends from the klipa to be absorbed into the holiness of the mitzvah. And the mitzvah, which is the will, his will, and is nullified within the blessed Ein Sof light. And the Alter Rebbe goes on to say not only mitzvahs that are mitzvahs of action, but also mitzvahs that we use speech, like studying Torah and praying. When being that the speech uses also energy of moving the lips and using the vitalizing soul to do that, that is also considered a sort of an action when you move your lips and you speak. That is why it is important when you study Torah, you don't just read it like you read the newspaper. You verbalize it. You say the words, because every time you invest your energy with verbalizing it, you are elevating and uniting your energy into God's energy, into Hashem himself, with the mitzvah, the holiness of the mitzvah. That's what Alter Rebbe says, v'gam b'mitzvah is Talmud Torah v'kriya shma v'tfilah v'kayetze behen, even in the case of mitzvahs, such as Torah study, reciting the Shema, prayer, and the like, the animal soul's power is elevated to holiness. Although they're not actual physical actions, although they do not involve actual physical action, which is under the dominion of the klipas nega, yet, he says, it is an accepted principle that thought is not a substitute for speech, and one does not fulfill his duty of Torah studies, prayer, etc., unless he actually utters the words with his lips. It is also accepted that moving one's lips constitutes action. Therefore, being that this is considered action, so here too you have the godly and the energy that is from the action of speaking. The words of Torah and prayer is elevated into holiness. לבטא בספסיים ובפה ולושן ושיניים הגשמיים, כי אם על ידי הנפש החיוניס הבהמיס המלובשת בעברי הגוף ממש. He says, because the divine soul cannot express itself with the physical lips, mouth, tongue, and teeth, the instrument of speech, except by way of the vitalizing animal soul. The godly soul is too spiritual. It needs the vitalizing animal soul to actually clothe in the organs of the body. And now the Alter Rebbe goes on to say that the more energy you put in, the more you elevate your entire being. וכל מה שמדבר בכוח גודל יסר ומכניס ומלביש יסר כיחס מנפש החיונס בדיבורים אלו. Hence, the more forcefully one speaks words of Torah prayer, the more the animal soul's energy he introduces and clothes in these words. Thereby, he converts more of the energy of the klipa to holiness. This is also the meaning of the verse, all my bones shall declare God who is like you. Which means that the words of the Torah and prayer must be said with all of one's bones, so that as much as possible, the body's energy be utilized in performing the mitzvahs. And Alter Rebbe goes on to say another point. He says, our sages tell us that if you want to remember the Torah, you have to invest everything, all of your body. The Gemara tells us the story with the Ruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir. She saw some students who studied Torah, but they did not verbalize it. So she told them, don't you know the verse that says in the prophets, Arucha bakol shemura, that when you place it in everything, and it's kept. And Alter Rebbe explains here that when you place the Torah in every part of you, then there is no forgetfulness. Why is that? Because by God, there's no such thing as forgetfulness. Holiness, there is no such thing as forgetfulness, because that is truth. You don't forget yourself. Something that is really, really important to you, something that is part of you completely, you don't forget. You get up in the morning, you don't forget that you have children. The things that are really important, you don't forget. So when you invest every part of you, you say the words with the voice, and you invest every part in the studying of the Torah, then you're elevating every part of it, and it becomes included in holiness. And therefore, there's no forgetfulness there. That's what it said, when you invest everything in there, it is not, you don't forget it. This is why our sages have said, if the Torah abides in all 248 limbs, it is preserved in your memory. Otherwise, it is not preserved. Why? For forgetfulness in matters of Torah stems from the klipa of the body and vitalizing animal soul, derived from the klipas noiga. It comes from the klipas noiga, which sometimes is absorbed into holiness. When it is absorbed into holiness, there is no longer any cause for forgetfulness, because, like I said, holiness is real, is truth, and that is no forgetfulness. This is accomplished when one weakens their power, the power of the body and animal soul, which is not a real power, but that's what is forgetfulness. But when you weaken their power, applying all their strength to the holiness of Torah and prayer. This is the end of this beautiful lesson. The Rebbe tells us, connecting to Hashem through every single mitzvah. And therefore, it could be one mitzvah. The world is already pure. The world is holy. All of these mitzvahs that has been done throughout the thousands of years. One more mitzvah can be the one that will tip the scale and bring us Moshiach very soon. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.